Hey YouTube, it's August 14th, 2020. I just wanted to come back and show that I'm still alive. Nothing really interesting has happened. I wanted to talk a little bit about firearms because it seems like all I talk about is religion. I know Christians are right now typing, it's not religion, it's a relationship. Oh, okay. But anyway, it's what I talk about it a lot, and I don't seem to talk that much about the things I do with tools and guns, or I don't know, cooking or any of my other interests. So I thought I'd update people a little bit, my 4 viewers. First of all, I want to introduce you to Betty and Veronica. And excuse me. I don't know if you can see this. This is Betty. Oh, come on. And this is Veronica. And obviously you can see why it's Betty and Veronica, because Betty is a blonde and Veronica is a brunette. And why did I name my guns after women? Well, it's not some pathetic incel thing, although maybe that would be a good idea. But I have a thing called a Kestrel, which is a ballistics calculator. It's a little electronic device that I learned how to use when I took a shooting course in June. And the way this thing works is you put information about your guns in it, and you have to name your guns. And I thought, I really don't want to go through a big list of numbers when I try to figure out which gun I'm looking at. So I'll just give them names. I think it's funny because it's what they do. I think they do it in the Marine Corps and so forth. It just seemed humorous to me. So this is Betty and this is Veronica. And I've also got Naomi and Tyra, my black rifles. So this is a 17 caliber, what is it, Hornady Magnum rimfire, I think is what that stands for. 17 HMR, it's like everything that a 22 wishes it could be, but isn't, except for inexpensive. It's kind of inexpensive. You can get ammunition for these things for a little over $10 a box, even during the horrible pandemic crisis where everybody's snapping up all the cartridges. But it's not as cheap as 22. And this thing is superb in terms of accuracy, unless the wind's blowing. The wind will blow the bullets around all over the place because they're tiny. I have 17 grain and 20 grain bullets. But anyway, it's extremely accurate. Sub-minute, I always say moment of angle, sub-minute of angle gun at 100 yards, no problem. And you can actually kill things with it up to something like 300 yards, maybe 400 if you're really lucky, I think. I'm not sure. So this is an Athlon Ares BTR Generation 2 scope. And it's like a $400 scope. I think I paid like $250 or $260 for the rifle. And you may be saying to yourself, why on earth would anyone do that? Why would you spend $400 on glass for like a $250 rifle? And of course, if you're a real shooter, you know the answer to that. And the answer is the glass is really important. I mean, it's the quality of your glass is more important than the quality of your gun. This thing is made in China for an American company, and they seem to be pretty good. They get great reviews, and the price is phenomenal. I mean, this is a 6-24 50 millimeter objective scope. It comes with its own lens caps. It's got nice target turrets. The first generation had mushy turrets, supposedly, that didn't work too well. These are nice, and it's very definite. You know exactly where you are when you turn these things. They say that they track well and they'll pass a box test well. I haven't tried it. Anyway, it's just a neat scope. Illuminated reticle, nice MRAD reticle. And it's kind of overkill for this gun because you can use this scope to shoot, 1,000 yards. And this thing, my understanding is that some people will take pot shots for fun at like 500 yards with it, but really it goes, I think it goes subsonic at like 300 or something. So the gun's not really made for that. But on the other hand, if you hunt with this thing, you might be shooting something really, really small, like eastern gray squirrels, or I don't know, mice. I don't know what you'd shoot with it, but you might hunt really small stuff with it. And when you're hunting small stuff, big magnification, it seems to me, would be very helpful. Especially when they're 100, 200 yards away. So the other thing is you can't really get anything that's like 15 power magnification in this line. I think the next step down is like 10 or something, and that's just not enough for this guy. So I think 24 will work fine. I've used this the other day, and I shot 4 groups. was the second time I shot with the scope, and 4 of the groups, 5-shot groups, 4 of them were sub MOA. The other one I kind of adjusted off the paper, so I don't know what it would look like. I turned the turrets until it left the paper, I think. The base that I got on this thing is a 20-minute of angle base, and I thought, why would you want a 20-minute of angle base, a slow base for a gun that only shoots 300 yards and can't really drop that far? And I thought, well, some people shoot at longer distances for fun, and what if I want to try that? And, it can't hurt. So I put this thing on here, and everything seemed to work great. And then I had to move the scope. Was it back or up? Forward. I had to move the scope forward because the eye relief was a problem. I only moved it 1 notch, and that changed the point of impact a great deal. And suddenly, I was no longer able to zero it at 50 yards or 100 yards. So I got another scope base on the way for it. But anyway, it's just, I guess what I'm trying to say is this relates to the group that I adjusted off the paper. That's why I ended up with one group that was totally off the paper. And at the end of the day, I was shooting, 3 inches above my point of aim, something like that at 100 yards, which is no good. So I do have a replacement base coming. But it's just a blast to shoot. The ammunition's inexpensive. The trigger on this gun is a Savage AccuTrigger, which is really nice. The barrel's great. It's just a tremendous pleasure. Almost no recoil. You can't even feel the recoil. It's not that loud. So it's just, there's nothing about this gun not to love as far as I'm concerned. And some people criticize it. They say the stock is cheap and they got a new one that they just came out with, blah, blah, blah. I finally got this gun the way I like it. I got I changed the trigger spring, and I don't know, just worked with it with the scope and so forth, and tested ammunition to find out what ammunition I like. And I don't want to go buy another gun just because it has a nicer stock. This stock works perfectly, so I don't know what the problem is. I'm sure the new Savage is wonderful and perhaps far superior to this, but I got no complaints. So what's this thing? This is a 204 Ruger. This is a Thompson Center. Really Smith & Wesson. Smith & Wesson took over Thompson Center. I don't know if Smith & Wesson is currently bankrupt. Usually they are. Anyway, they took over Thompson Center, and so this is really a Smith & Wesson. And it's very, very accurate. They give you a 1 minute of angle guarantee. A 3-shot round, 3-shot group, 100 yards, 1 minute of angle. And yes, it will do it. And these things, they shoot factory ammunition really well. These calibers, for some reason, I mean, modern bullets get more and more accurate and do better and better things. Like, it seems like the 308 is pretty much obsolete now. There's just basically no reason for anyone ever to buy one. And it's like a 50-year-old cartridge, something like that. And these things are, I guess, post-2000 cartridges, super duper accurate, and you can buy cheap ammunition. I've been shooting Fiocchi 40 grain ammunition from this gun here from Veronica, and it will pretty much go nearly, I think that if I shot better, this thing would pretty much go through one hole most of the time at 100 yards. And I don't mean one hole that's 204 thousandths of an inch in diameter. It would be like a half-inch hole. But still, I mean, it's really accurate. It's just great. So I like this gun a lot. I changed the trigger spring in it. This is a Venture, the original Venture, and the trigger is adjustable, but you can only adjust it down to like 4.5 pounds, which is ludicrous. So I went to a company called M Carbo, and I bought myself a lighter spring. And now really it's really light. It's like, I don't know exactly what it is because I can't measure it, but I have triggers that are supposedly like 2 pounds, and this thing is lighter. It scared me a little when I was playing with it, dry firing it. But when I took it out and shot it, it actually does work. You just have to make sure you use your safety, but you're supposed to do that anyway. You don't want it to go off because you breathe on it. And this is a Vortex Viper PST 5-25 or 6-24, whatever it is, Generation 1 scope that I bought by accident. I was going to put it on my Ruger Precision rifle, and then I found out it was a Generation 1 scope, and the glass is not supposed to be that great. And I said, well, I'm not having that. I'm not going to spend all this money on a precision rifle and then cheap out on the glass. I mean, you're already cheaping out when you buy a Vortex. You're supposed to get something like a Night Force for $2,500, and I wasn't doing that. So I got this scope for like, I don't know, $500 on sale, discontinued. And then I found out it was the wrong thing. So what I finally did was I bought a floor model, demonstrator Generation 2 scope and stuck that on my Ruger. And I'll tell you, I make people mad when I say this, but so far I can't really tell the difference in the glass between these two scopes. This thing seems to be wonderful. I'm not sure I'm not sure why you would want this scope over a Viper, but of course I don't know that much. I'm not an expert. I'm sure somebody who knows more about it can chime right in. So I've had a lot of fun with these things over the last couple of weeks, and I really highly recommend 17 HMR, and I highly recommend 204 Ruger. If you like shooting precisely and you don't like a lot of recoil and noise and you want something that's inexpensive and it's actually useful, these things are extremely useful. I mean, this thing will kill anything smaller than a coyote, and this thing will, there are people that shoot deer with these. My understanding is that's a really bad idea, but it's like a very popular coyote gun. So you can shoot a lot of stuff with these. Anyway, Betty and Veronica, now I've said something that wasn't about religion, and I put them down where they came from. Oh, I'm glad I didn't call either of them Jughead. So, what's the video about? Well, I'm going to go back to religion. A lady posted, I guess it was a lady, I'm guessing by the name, her YouTube name. I mean, these days you never know. Even if you meet them face to face, you never know. So she posted a comment on one of my videos. I had a dream about the rapture, and I talked about it. And I also talked about some wonderful things that had happened in the lives of some friends of mine, Alonzo and Terry, a couple that I met in Miami. And we have gone through a lot together. And Alonzo and I were volunteers at a big money-grubbing church called Trinity Church in Miami Gardens. We've gone through a lot in our Christian walks. We've learned a lot about God, and we've been blessed a lot. I was talking about the rapture, and I said there are little raptures. Not every rapture is the rapture. Sometimes God will rapture you out of a bad place and put you in a good place. The Bible seems to make it pretty clear. Seems to make it clear. Is it right to say seems to make it clear? If it makes it clear, then it makes it clear. Well, the Bible demonstrates that the more messed up you are, the worse the place where you live is likely to be. And you can see this in the way that God treated the Jews. The better they behaved, the bigger their territory got. And they stayed in Israel. And when they behaved badly, not only did they lose their territory, but they had to leave. And they were gone for, what, 1,800 years or something? Let's see, 70 AD. Okay, almost 2,000 years. So, I was talking about how God raptures people from bad places to good places. And I said, Alonzo and Terry, when I first met them, lived in this horrible house in Liberty City, which is a ghetto in Miami. And I said something about what a horrible place it was and how people in that area demonstrated very poor behavior and poor values. I said, this is a place where you'll see a $70,000 BMW in front of a house that's worth, the same amount. And that's actually true. I helped Alonzo and Terry move out of that house, and on the day that I did that, there was a beautiful BMW parked in front of a place just down the road, a block or two, which was a shack. So you got this depreciating asset here, this car that's worth absolutely nothing in terms of creating income or conserving capital. All it does is waste money, and it's sitting in front of a house that's probably worth $75,000, $80,000. And whoever bought this thing could have bought, if not a better property to live in, could have bought a warehouse to rent to other people, or a condominium or something that would have increased in value. Could have put the money in. Could have put $50,000 in the stock market and $20,000 in a Toyota. So everything I said was true. And this lady got really offended, the one who commented, and she said things like, people in rich neighborhoods sin more than people in poor neighborhoods, and she said that everything I had, I got from the suffering of other people. And she said, I brag, and she said something about how I claimed I was rich, and she didn't see wealth. All she saw was a cluttered place that needed to be cleaned up. And I just looked at this thing and I thought, first of all, how does she know how I got what I have? She doesn't. She has no idea. And what I said, I typed a comment to her, a big long comment in response. And I was nice, but I was firm. And one of the things I said was, the only person who ever suffered to give me anything was a very kind Jewish man who allowed himself to be nailed to a cross to help me to escape my own wickedness. I don't remember exactly how I put it, but that's what I said. And I said, as far as I know, I've never said that I was rich, and I've never bragged, as far as I know. Now, there's one exception. I said that I make the best Sicilian pizza on earth. You got me there. And I say that as kind of in a lighthearted way. I'm not trying to make people admire me for that. I don't care what people think about my pizza. I really do make amazing, amazing Sicilian pizza, and it may not be the best on earth, but I've never had I've never had Sicilian pizza anywhere that compared. I'll put it that way. It's sublime. And I think it came as a revelation from God. I think the recipe did, because one day in January, I think it was, of 2009, I tried to make pizza for years. So if you think I'm a bragger, a braggart would say, I'm just a great cook and I have so much ability that making pizza was easy for me. And that's not what happened. I tried to make pizza for years and couldn't do it, because pizza is actually very difficult to make well. It's not making it that's hard. It's finding out what to do that's hard, because there's so many people out there putting out terrible recipes and they're saying, oh, this stuff's great. And you try it and they just lead you down the garden path and you never end up with good pizza. Almost everyone who says they make good pizza they make bad pizza. So one day I was sitting around and I had this idea, and I thought, what if I do this? And I use this sauce and this method and these two cheeses and so forth. And the pizza was just mind-blowing. It was the best pizza, period, that I had ever had in my life. I couldn't believe it. And from then on, it got better and better as I made little improvements. So I really do make phenomenal Sicilian pizza, and it may not be the best on earth. And I did brag about that, but I don't think I brag about other things. I don't think talking about things about yourself that are positive is necessarily bragging. Even Jesus did that. He said he was greater than Solomon. So was that bragging? I mean, when he said something about Solomon, he was talking about how the Jews respected Solomon, and he said, one greater than Solomon is here. That's not bragging. I mean, look, here's what I say. If Shaquille O'Neal says, I am 7 feet 1 inch tall, or whatever it is that bragging? No, that's the truth, and you just stating a fact. Whether it's bragging or not depends on the state of mind and the state of his heart. It depends on what he's trying to do with that statement. So as far as I know, I haven't done that on this channel. I certainly try not to do that, because pride is very, very toxic. It's extremely destructive, and I don't want to be proud. Anyway, this lady accused me of all kinds of things and just said stuff that I thought was wrong and didn't back it up. And then I responded to her, and then her comment disappeared. So I don't know, maybe she thought better of it. But one of the things she was criticizing me about was clutter. And I sincerely, and I really mean sincerely, have to thank her for that, because she is right. I am not a neat person. I would like to be. I was raised a certain way. My parents neglected me. And one of the ways that my mother neglected me was that she spoiled me. And the spoiling is a form of neglect. I remember when I was very young that she would tell me to pick up my toys and put them in a box and so forth. And after that, there was basically nothing. I mean, she and my father never sat me down and said, every day at 6 p.m. you will sit down and do homework for an hour and a half. They never said you will exercise, during this time and that time. They never said this is the time we set aside for prayer. They never said we go to church every week and this is how you bathe correctly. This is how you iron your clothing. This is how you do laundry. They didn't do anything like that. They just kind of let me go on autopilot. And when you treat kids like that, they grow up with habits that are really, really difficult to break. And an interesting thing about habits, I think God showed me this, is a habit is like a slave. If you have a good habit inside you, that habit will get things done for you. I mean, granted, you'll be the one doing the things, but you won't struggle and suffer that much when you do these things. It'll be sort of automatic. So good habits are like slaves, but if you have bad habits, well, then you're a slave to the habit, So I have some bad habits that I've had to overcome, or lack of good habits, maybe I should say, in many cases. And it's tough trying to keep everything neat and organized, especially if you're a creative person. Now, I will say, and I'm not bragging, I will say I'm an extremely creative person, and that's not bragging, because extreme creativity, I don't think it's really a gift. I think it almost ranks as a mental disorder, because it causes a lot of problems in your life. It makes your mind wander, and it makes it hard for you to fit in with society. It separates you from other people in a way that's not, in my opinion, is not positive. It causes other people to envy you and mistreat you, because people have this unbelievably stupid idea that creativity is a great, valuable gift. It's really, you want your kids to be to have good lives. You don't want them to be brilliant and creative. Trust me. What you want is for them to be pretty smart, and you want them to have good character. Those are the people that succeed in life. That's what you really want. I'm telling you that as a very smart, very creative person. So anyway, creativity makes it difficult to be organized, and I'm also forgetful, which is common with people that are creative. So I have to fight my flesh all the time, and I actually had a spirit of something called acedia. You can look this up. It's like laziness and apathy and so forth, cast out of me in church, and I felt this thing. My hands, the preacher was talking about how people needed to have this cast out of them, and my hands got cold like ice, and I felt something twisting around inside me, and I said, I need this, and I went up and got it cast out. But the thing is, things like that can come back. So this is something I still battle. So I really sincerely am glad that she said this, because it motivated me to get up and clean up one of my workbenches. I do these videos for the most part in my gun room, which would be a dining room, except that I'm not married, so I get to do whatever I want. And I have 2 workbenches in this room, and that's one of them behind me. I've been going crazy with firearms related things for the last, gosh, I don't know, 8 or 9 months. And I've been in a real hurry because I've had this concern. First of all, I think the rapture, I have this feeling, I have this feeling, this strong feeling the rapture is going to come this year. But the weird thing about things like that is God will have events like that on his schedule, but at the same time, he'll sort of have people live their lives for the most part as they always have. So you won't quit, dieting or exercising. You won't quit investing or building houses or marrying and things like that. It's like the Bible says, in the times of Noah, people were marrying and doing this and doing that. But even though God is involved, may be involved in things like that in your life, he may still be planning to have some horrible event. Not horrible for me, I hope, but horrible for people who miss it, like the flood or the rapture or something. So anyway, I keep thinking, what if the rapture doesn't come? What if Kamala Harris is our president? Because Joe Biden really is demented, and he's not gonna make it. What if Kamala Harris really is our president, and either Democrats are able to make it impossible to get firearms and ammunition, or conservatives respond to their election by hoarding things to the extent where you just can't get anything? What if those things happen? So I'm just kind of furiously going at it. I took this course and I practiced a lot, and I built a platform for shooting out in my pasture, and I'm putting all these guns together and reloading ammunition and accumulating ammunition. So I've been doing a lot of stuff. I've been really busy in here. So you take that activity and you combine it with my inner flaws, my own character flaws, and I have definitely made a mess of my workbench. And this room, I believe by now I will have already put up a photo of the workbench so you can see it without me in the way. And even though I straightened it up today because I thought about this lady's comment, I thought, she may not be the nicest person on earth, but boy, is she right. And it's a good motivation to get up and do something. I always like it when friends come over, because when I know friends are coming over, and I admit this to them, I just say, I'm glad you're coming over because it will motivate me to clean the house so I look like I'm a neater person than I really am. And that's what this lady's comment has done for me. And I won't show you the rest of the gun room because there's still things on the floor. There's ammunition I haven't figured out where to store. I put up some shelves that I got from Home Depot, some plastic shelves that are like $40 for a set, to hold things like ammunition and gun paraphernalia. But it turns out, even though they say they'll hold 75 pounds per shelf, that they really don't. I mean, maybe if you spread it out perfectly, maybe if you spread out a layer of sand that's exactly uniform and it weighs 75 pounds, these shells will be okay with it. But that's not how life really works. So they sag, and it's disturbing. And I said to myself, I'm going to go to Home Depot and I'll get some steel shells. I'll just bite the bullet and pay $150 each or whatever it is for shells, and put them together. And of course, people started hoarding shells, and I can't figure that either they hoarded shells, or maybe all the people in China at the factories who make the shells got sick or were quarantined, and I couldn't get the shells. So I've got this junk now. I've got ammunition and gunsmithing or reloading stuff. and I'm just at a loss as to what I should do with it. So I did get the workbench cleaned up. My other workbench is, you know, not that far from cleaned up. I mean, it would only take me 5 minutes to straighten it out. I would like to say I can keep it clean and neat from now on, but I'm not that optimistic. Anyway, this lady talked about, she said, rich people. Whenever someone talks about rich people, most of the time that's somebody who's not successful talking. Most of the time that's somebody who's never had anything. And they think that if you own your own car, you're rich, or if you own your own house, you're rich. That's a funny thing about the Democrats now. When they talk about rich people and how they're going to stick it to rich people and take all their money, this mythical pile of golden eggs that people who are successful supposedly have, they think that there's this big pile of golden eggs, and that if we pass it out, everybody will be fine. And of course, the truth is, when you give money to poor people, you don't get rich people. You get poor people who have just wasted all the money you gave them. That's the way things work, because poverty isn't an external thing, it's an internal thing. So you see this with lottery winners all the time, or NBA players, or other professional athletes. They get fabulously wealthy, and then the next thing you know, they have some either they have no job, or if it's an athlete, they'll have some pity job that someone gave them. There's some very famous athletes that have. There's one guy, I'm not going to say his name, but he ended up selling meat to supermarkets, which is a job, you know, obviously a pity job. Somebody who was a fan gave to him. And he used to go, there was a dance that he was famous for doing at football games. And when he would go to these supermarkets, they said in this article that I read, and he would, the people who sold him the meat, who bought the meat from him, would ask him to dance, and he would dance for them. I thought that was so sad. Anyway, when you give money to poor people, you don't get rich people. You get, as I said, you get poor people who have money for the moment and are poor, or even poorer than they used to be in the future, because that's the way they are. You have to get your heart and your mind straight if you want to have anything in this life. So anyway, she said something about how rich people sin more than poor people, and you could just tell she had a victimhood mindset. You know, kind of a BLM Antifa mindset. We just got to take what these other people have, and then we'll be okay. Now look how that worked out in Cuba. I mean, look how it worked out in Cambodia. Look how it worked out in Russia. It doesn't work. So I responded to her, and I said something I think people need to hear. One of the hallmarks, one of the distinguishing marks of people who aren't going to do well in life, and whose descendants, whose children and grandchildren aren't going to do well, is that they see a diagnosis as a criminal charge. If someone says, stop playing the lottery and don't smoke weed, and you shouldn't live with your girlfriend because God hates fornication and he won't bless it. If you say things like that to people and they get angry and they start defending themselves, you know those are people that aren't going to do well, and their descendants aren't going to do well. Correction is like gold. It's like free money. It's better than money, because, as I said before, money, if you aren't right internally, you're not going to hold on to whatever money you get. Correction is beautiful. It's a spectacular gift, no matter where it comes from. And when you hear it, you need to grab onto it and try to be humble and make use of it. And, you know, there's a great example I can show you right now. This lady was mean to me, and she said something about me that was maybe a little exaggerated, but true, basically true. And I took it to heart, and I cleaned up my workbench. I hope I can clean up everything, but, you know, Rome wasn't built in a day. But anyway, I took what she said to heart, because even though she didn't have my best interest at heart, she said something that was very useful to me. And I said something that was very useful when I talked about how bad ghettos are. And I'm saying something useful now when I talk about the fact that the poor cause their own problems. By and large, they cause their own problems. And I know people are going to type in there and say, well, I know this guy who, had both of his legs amputated, and, he's on a respirator. and he lives in an iron lung or whatever. And are you saying it's his fault? Well, you know what? You have to learn. You have to learn the value of a good generalization. You can always find a counterexample that will render a very valuable and valid generation. It will render it useless. Of course, there are surely people out there whose poverty is not their fault, but by and large, poverty is caused by the poor. People say, "Oh, crime is caused by poverty." No, poverty is caused by crime. That's one of the penalties. There, a lot of rotten things that happen to people are caused by their own bad behavior, by their pride, by their unwillingness to admit fault, their unwillingness to listen. I know a lot of poor people. I'm not just sitting here in an ivory tower looking down from, I'm not looking down from Mount Olympus at people I don't understand. Most of my friends are not successful people. Actually, right now, most of my friends are black, and I know a lot about people who don't do well. And I can tell you a few things. I can tell you, first of all, the poor are really proud. They are much, much prouder than successful people. And you can even see this on social media. This is an interesting thing. If your name is like Bob Jones and you're, a reasonably successful person, you'll go on Facebook and you'll call yourself Bob Jones. But if you're some guy that's in and out of jail all the time, who lives in his mom's house and beats his mother and smokes weed all day, you're going to call yourself something like, DJ Supreme Superman Adonai. Poor people come up with these weird, extremely flattering things that they call themselves, and they expect other people to honor it. They call themselves prophetess or something like that. You can't tell the poor anything. I mean, I've been there and I've tried. They think they know everything already. They are like old wineskins that are full of old wine. You can't put the new wine in there. And this is one reason why they stay poor. They don't save money. They insist on gambling and drinking and smoking weed. They have kids outside of wedlock routinely. And then in many cases they run off and don't raise their kids. And it's not just the men, a lot of the women do it. I mean, if you come from an unsuccessful segment of society, ask yourself honestly, how many people do you know who've been raised by their grandmothers? Now, I know some. Poor people commit more violent crime than people who are well off, much more. They commit most of it. They commit more property crime. Their interactions with the police are not inspiring. I'll put it that way. Typically, they're not inspiring. They make life very, very difficult for the police. The police raise their children. I mean, that's one of the things about really unsuccessful people. They know the police really well. I mean, I interact with the police like once every couple of years, something like that. Once every 3 years, maybe. I haven't interacted with them this year at all. I can't remember interacting with them last year or the year before. If you come from an unsuccessful segment of society, there's a pretty good chance you know the police who work in your neighborhood, either on a first name basis or at least you know their last names. And they come and they break up fights in people's houses and in their yards, and they take their kids away to be taken care of by the government. This is the kind of thing that you see happen in unsuccessful in areas where unsuccessful people are concentrated. Poor people are much more hypocritical in America than people who are well off. It's just the truth. You have to have humility. You have to be able to admit fault. You have to stop blaming other people for what's happened to you, for what you've done to yourself, for you have to admit that your parents screwed up. You have to admit that the people around you are bad influences. You have to get away from them. You can't just march around and and set fires and complain. When you do that, you're giving up your power. You're saying, these imaginary wealthy white people are going to help me. I will make them help me because I don't have the power to help myself. If they screwed up my life, that means they have total power over me, because if I were a powerful person, that could never have happened. So I am powerless, and but I will try to but I will try to manipulate. I will make other people miserable until they do my will. That's really what you're saying when you blame other people for your problems. You're saying you're powerless and they have all the power. And you're more than that, you're saying you're demonizing them, and you're saying they're evil, rotten people. And but at the same time, you're saying I want evil, rotten people to help me. I expect these rotten, maybe if you're black. I mean, poor white people have the same attitude, but I'm just saying if you're black, you may be saying to yourself, there's systematic racism and white people are all racist and they hate me. Why would you go to those people for help? So there's a lot of really counterproductive activities among poor people, and especially among minorities, because minorities don't get any correction. Everybody's afraid to say there's a problem with black racism, there's a problem with Latin racism. But black people now have come up with this idea, and of course I'm not saying all black people, obviously. I'm not saying this about, Colleen Noir or Candace Owens. I mean, I'm saying this about people who have been deceived and who are drinking the Kool-Aid. I drifted off there for a second, so I want to try to come back. I was saying I'm not talking about every person of color, or whatever the correct term is now, but there's this idea that only white people can be racist, and some Asians are also under some circumstances are permitted to be racist. That's just asinine. That's the dumbest thing in the universe. You can't just make something like that up and then spew it out and expect people to take it seriously and pretend that it's true. Of course it's not true. I always think about Colin Ferguson, the guy who shot up a train in New York. He ran around shooting white people and specifically saying that was the reason that he was shooting them. What is that? If that's not a racist, what is that? Elijah Muhammad started the Nation of Islam. Him and some Pakistani guy named Wallace Fard. They said that white people were created in a laboratory by a scientist named Mr. Yaqub, and that all white people were devils. That's racism. I don't care who says it. It's amazing that people are so crazy that they think they can decide what the English language means and what other people are allowed to say. So what I was trying to say is there's this myth among certain minority members that they can do no wrong. And people are very reluctant to correct people who are members of minorities when they say and do racist things, which they very clearly do all the time in a much more overt way than white people do. Much more overt, much more systematic. If you have black friends, you know what I'm talking about. They'll say things like, when you leave my house, be very careful because you're a target in this neighborhood. I've had people say that to me more than once. My young friend Travis, who died in May, he would say things like, we'll go to this place or that place in my area. Don't worry, you'll be safe because I'll be with you. That's because of racism. There's a problem in Miami that used to happen all the time. Somebody would have a car accident in a black area, and if that person wasn't black, they would pull him out of the car and beat him until he had to go to the hospital. That's racism. That's a lynching. What happened to Reginald Denny in the LA riots was a lynching. So it's really bizarre how people on the left have decided that certain people in certain segments of society are not subject to correction. It's something that shouldn't apply to them. And it's really poisonous because correction is one of the most important things that can happen to a person. There is no growth without correction. Without correction, you just fester and get worse. So I'll stop now and try to get back to wherever I was in the video. Well, I don't know. I don't want to go off on a tangent, but I'm just saying America's full of people who think those who have things are evil and yet they expect the people who are evil to help them and change their lives. They're making those people, and they're making the government into their gods, their messiahs. And what they really need to do is go to school, read the Bible, pray every day, get baptized, speak in tongues as much as possible, and look at what the Word says. The Word says correction is extremely important. It says, let the righteous smite me. It shall be an excellent. It says, let the righteous smite me. It shall be an excellent oil, which shall not break my head. There's all kinds of verses in the Bible about people who can't take correction. Those are the people that go to hell. There's this myth of the righteousness of the poor, which just isn't true. I mean, sure, there's plenty of good poor people, and there's a lot of vile people who are well off. And it seems like when people get extremely well off, they do tend to become very, very corrupt. But I know the upper middle class, and I know the lower class, and I'm telling you right now, if I had to be put on a desert island, like in a survivor scenario, with 1,000 people, and I had to choose between the poor and people who make $300,000 a year, I would go with the latter group in a heartbeat. I mean, if we had to be put on this island with the same things, the same supplies at the same time, absolutely 100% I would go with the second group, because they wouldn't steal from me, they wouldn't beat me up, they would work together, they would know things, they would know how to do things, how to make things happen to improve everybody's lot. The poor would just be protesting and taking each other's stuff. I mean, I'm sorry, but it's true. It's 100% true. And yes, it's a generalization. Yes, there are plenty of people this doesn't apply to. But the idea that people who are well off are your problem is just sick and evil. The Word says envy rots the bones. And, I have been an envious person. I have resented people who have more than I do. I have been that way, even though I didn't want to be. And so I'm not talking like somebody who's never sinned, who's never had a problem in his heart. You need to get away from that stuff. I don't know if this will be received well at all. I guess maybe I'll receive some nasty comments. But one of the things God showed me, and He shows other people the same thing, is you're not really responsible for how other people respond to what you say. That's 100% their fault. And if you're offended by something I say, that's your problem, not mine. I take no responsibility. I am not to blame. You have to understand the way guilt works in God's system. It may be bad for a person to say something to another person, but that's between him and God. If another person hears it and responds in an evil way, that person's response is on his own head. It's not on the head of the person who provoked him. So if the first person has sinned, that's between him and God. And if the other person responds in a sinful way, that's between him and God. You can't say somebody wore a red hat and I punched him in the face, so it's his fault. God's not going to have any interest in that. He's not going to ask you what kind of hat the guy was wearing. Okay? I really hope this will be useful to you, because it changes lives. When you admit that you're at fault, when you admit that you cause all your problems, God starts opening up the floodgates to you. And it's been a very useful thing to me. It's one of the good things that I learned actually from going to law school. Lawyers are held responsible for everything. And you can get in huge trouble for things like having your cell phone go off in court, for doing something one day late. You can be financially ruined for something like that. Lawyers have to be ultra responsible. One of the things I learned when I was in law school was to take responsibility for everything. And I'm not saying I implemented that lesson as well as I could have, or perfectly, but it was a very, very useful thing later when I became a Christian, because Christianity is the same way. Even if you're not sure you're responsible for something, just take responsibility. Take responsibility and see what you can do. When you take responsibility, you take power, you take control. And I believe God blesses that. He will give you help if you will take responsibility. But if you lie around and blame other people and you go out and loot, all you're doing is saying, I don't want to go in the rapture. I don't want to go to heaven. I want to sit on my mom's couch and smoke weed and have my friends tell me I'm right. My friends who are equally unsuccessful. I don't know. Learn from what I say or continue poisoning your life. It's up to you. I hope this is helpful. I really do hope it's helpful. I'm not saying this to make people feel bad. I hope people listen to this and they change their ways. Don't screw up your lives. Don't continue it. I did a lot of things that messed up my life. Don't do what I did. I would love to meet you on the streets of gold and find out that I said something that helped you to improve your life and then to get there. So that's it. Have a great day.